Okay, here's some critical intelligence that no one is going to tell you. The whole industry won't tell you on a standard sense because collectively we haven't reached collective intelligence and we don't want to share collective intelligence. But I just share critical intelligence because that's who I am. I'm like kind of like intelligent and informative based. And that's just who I am, and where I'm at is because that's what I'm leaning towards, and that contributes to the collective, whether you want to recognize that or not. But what I'm about to tell you is key here, and you know may you and the inspiration will be like, it will be infinitely received, obviously. So here's one thing about the ego that you're not going to hear from the new age community, from the spiritual, the the kind of like fragmented false spiritual industries. And I'm just saying it on a standard level because the critical intelligence, it's not necessarily like particular insights aren't necessarily like made available for everybody, or they're not even known. There's insights in the future that are not even known yet. So for those insights that are not known yet, they're like they're kind of it's just like it's like a thing that doesn't exist, kind of. But who's to say if it somehow exists in the future, in the ether somewhere. But what I'm about to tell you in this present time, it's not known, particularly within the collective critical intelligence. And it's not necessarily known just in general in present time. And it's one thing about the ego. So the ego is it's multifaceted, what we don't know on a critical intelligence level. And within that ego being multifaceted, we're growing with that surface level human ego. Everybody on the planet, no matter what species you are, whatever you are, there's still some type of character identification facet to your whatever the F you are. And within that, it's not necessarily about getting, just putting it in a human perspective. It's beyond the human perspective as well. But obviously, we're, as humans, and not good, not bad, we're gonna like make it about ourselves. And we can look at it in the human perspective too, obviously, because that's what we're operating with. So the thing I'm about to tell you right here is it's a quote unquote unknown insight, end quote. And the unknown insight and how it's getting like introduced, it's because some type of there's some type of subconscious dormant preservation factor that's there, that's in the divine order underneath any type of chaos, respectively. Because yeah, we all could agree and know and see that there is chaos, and yeah, we could all know and agree and see that there is order as well. But we're not necessarily um we're not necessarily affiliating ourselves and paying attention to the order for whatever reason. 3D is, that's just that's, there's growing pains within the 3D, and there's also luxury within the 3D, and those are not good or not bad. It's just that those are just a matter of life, to get to receive luxury or to receive growing pains. That's just the 3D life. And so that being part of it, the young human critical intelligence doesn't necessarily know how the order works or why the chaos is what it is, because 3D is operating on a shared level of chaos and order. But where the collective critical intelligence and the collective intelligence and the collective consciousness is using the chaos more so to justify its ends and means. And since it's doing that, it's making the collective situation to be what it is, because that's the 3D. The 3D has came from a level of quote unquote a particular type of shadow, end quote. It's getting out of that particular type of shadow, and it just operated off of those energy dynamics of, where the chaos was more subscribed to and affiliated with within the past 2000 to like 16,000 years in this particular realm of the physicality. if you want to take into account like some type of Vedic calendar or Vedic map respectively, and how they're kind of charting it to see like, you know, Kali Yuga lasted this long in this place, you know. But it's all like a context thing, obviously, because there's different perspectives on that. So if we just say like time works differently for different places. So if time works differently for different places, Kali Yuga, for all we know, it could have been happened this like millions of years. It's just a matter of like where that energy needs to be in the universe itself. You know, in the universe itself, it's a more amplified, expanded version of chaos and order, and only God can help you. But we're misunderstanding what God is. So what I'm really trying to say here is one key thing about the ego, and I know I look weird, you know, and I'm not really concerned with that. But and that's another key thing right there. It's like that's the irony right there, you know. The whole thing that I'm talking about is the growing ego, the growing character ego. And that growing character ego, it's going through all these different dualities, and how we're barely growing our awareness and our physical maturation into the awareness of how 3D works. Because how it, like, why would you want to know how 3D works? Why would you want to know? So there's not an affiliation and a relationship with confusion that's in ignorance, confusion that's in detriment, because the confusion that's in detriment, that's creating the particular type of discomfort. Because if you had some type of non-confusion and knowingness on how to have a particular type of solution to go out of the incomfort, then that would be the opposite of confusion, right? And ignorance. And we're growing out of that through that particular energy dynamic. And with that comes some type of discomfort, right? So the key thing I wanted to put here was like, yeah, there's irony that like, you know, the ego, it's I say it's ironic because everything has to do with this, but we don't realize that everything has to do with this. And it's how we're growing with our unique soul ego. The topic, that's the title of this video. It's the soul ego that has been made into a conditioned ego in the human realm, and that human could go towards some destiny of some type of quote unquote robot, end quote. This is high standard, you know, meta sciences, if you just read between the lines. Why? Because it's giving you the information that we all fucking use. We all fucking use the air element. So whoever, like, you know, knocks me or tries to insult me or throw something at me, you're just hurting yourself, because you need air too. So if you try to hurt something that's helping you elementally, then you're like, then have fun like with your metaphysical suicide or whatever. And I'm saying that standardly. So the title of this video is called, or just a rough title of this video is called The Soul Ego. And I haven't introduced the point that I'm gonna introduce, because I've just been kind of like intuitively raw drafting it. And as I've been intuitively raw drafting it, I am trying to explain, you know, casually, the collective critical intelligence. We don't know about certain things because we're not subscribing to the order of order for whatever fucking reason. If it's a reason of immaturity, if it's a reason of unknowingness, if it's a reason of ancestral karma, and your family's fucking influencing you so much that you don't know how to constructively oppose your own case and disposition, for just you to make your own claim in case of your own sovereignty, just to be you. It's beyond the ancestral karmas. And the thing that's, and it's not, I'm not trying to say opposition is good or bad. No, I'm just saying opposition, there's a sovereign perspective in opposition. There's a sovereign context in opposition. And the sovereign context in opposition is something aside from the matrix that recognizes the matrix. There's spiritual energies that are sovereign from the surface level matrix. Saturn, quote unquote, versus quote unquote Uranus, end quote. Some type of, within the recent Kali Yuga, the collective matrix was Saturn, and Uranus within different layers was something that it didn't necessarily oppose the matrix. It opposed the non-sovereignty within the matrix. That's what Uranus is. Uranus is in every human's chart, and that's the fucking game of the Matrix itself. That's the whole fucking game, low key simplified, of all of the esoteric shit. Because we're underestimating and misunderstanding like the real depthful significance, the real deep significance of what these key signature, however you want to look at the original planetary energies, and how they interconnect in the human body, and how that human body has a chance to go towards the place of residence, however they will go to these different planets, whether it's in their shadow or not, or maybe a little bit of both, because we're borrowing the energies from them. So the main point I wanted to say was, in the beginning of this video, I wanted to just say, like, the ego could be a blinder. And what do I mean by that? The ego could be a blinder. Not good, not bad. It's just something. But first, before I even say that, we have to even understand what the ego is. Before I even say the ego is a blinder, like, we have to really understand what is the ego, like, for real, like on a real critical intelligence level that no one's telling you. And you could see, like, people are just doing what they do based on their past conditioning and their collective homogenization. They're just going with the fucking narrative of the collective of the matrix, and they're just being herded along based on what they were taught and habitually patternized to do. No judgment. But that's the energy psychologies within all these, quote unquote, new age companies. They're herding along towards, like, an incomplete fragmented narrative. That's why the future of God's shit, it's beyond all of those companies, because it's really pointing towards purity and the whole truth of balance. So and if you read between the lines, it is what it is. And your judgments that you cast upon another person, that's your choice to do upon something. And that has a subtle, there's like all these many tests, subtle effects, subtle reactions, subtle causes, subtle, like, options, subtle, like, inclinations, subtle, like, you know higher self provocations. Here's the organ. How will you use this organ within your human life, journey, right? How will you use your stomach? How will you use your sacral? How will you use your root? How will you use your brain? Is that in alignment, type of shit? So the main point of this video, I should have said this in the very, very beginning. The whole, like, premise of this video is, like, how is the ego a blinder? But first, before saying how the ego is a blinder, we have to understand what the ego is. What is the ego? What is the ego compromised of? And how is the ego kind of like the surface level, like, kind of interface module operating system of your human life? And on a metaphysical level, like, and obviously standardly neutrally, it is beyond AI, because it's seeing how like, on a non-dual level, the human is like, the AI is like the cousin of the human, because the human is doing the same shit in a different way, though, in a different format. And the ego is kind of based on its level of conditioning and deconditioning. It's making some type of subtle choices and decisions for you that we don't necessarily know. And the conditioning could receive the conditioning of life. It carries the traumas of your life. And the deconditioning of your life, it carries the healing of your life. So that's the journey. So within that journey, we have to understand what the ego is. The ego is kind of blinded to that shit, to the information. The ego is subscribing to the ignorance. The ego is blinded to the real insight. The ego is blinded to how to fucking behave and act. And 3D, it's getting, no matter who the fuck you are, and the 3D is receiving the accountings for that, right? No matter, even if you're materially successful, your ego is like, there's a disalignment on an advanced metaphysical level, you know, because you're accumulating ignorance. That ignorance is having a certain cause to the making a particular effect. That effect is making the quality of your life. The quality of your life is low key shaping your future, your destiny, and your fate. And your future and your destiny and your fate, you could only really neutrally like work for God to solve that shit. And I'm not trying to sell anything, I'm just trying to say it how it fucking is, purely. But to really fucking solve that shit, you're misinterpreting God, and that's your fault. That's your shit. That's your problem. In that creates ignorance. Ignorance could be a problem, and you metaphorically, metaphysically shitting on God. That's, you're creating your own ignorance long term, and that ignorance long term is gonna do whatever it will fucking do. Doth. And I like, and it is what it is, you know. Dooth. But anyways, excuse my French. But first we have to understand, what is the ego. I should have mentioned it right off the bat, but like, you know, intuitive insights come in there from there upon the metaphysical lily pad and the metaphysical frog pond and the metaphysical, you know, fucking Kiki goes to fucking special delivery service. I don't know why that came out. But what is the ego compromised of? And yeah, I know you know, body language is kind of outdated too, because it's like, you know, we underestimate like the spirits of and the environment and shit. The environment and the spirits, they're doing way more shit than your GMO fucking ain't fucking really anything fucking petty ass fucking ain't shit thing, you know. It's like because like, if you're subscribing to ignorance and you have no purpose, your shit doesn't matter, you know. So it's like, that whole thing is like, some things are just being dismissed, you know, case closed type of shit, you know. But you know, the whole like, you know, the thing that transcends body language, that's a different podcast, and I actually did that one underground a long time ago. So I'm just kind of giving you a little clip of that, you know. But the title of this video is like, what is the ego compromised of? And why is that important to know? And how that actually creates our destiny low key. And you don't have to believe me. I'm just saying this is what I've kind of like processed it and whatnot. Because the future is critical, you know. Aside from all the hype, aside from all the distractions, aside from all the ignorance, aside from all like the petty conformity type of, you know, shit, you know. And the petty conformity type of shit is, you're leaning on your detrimental like ignorant ego to fucking not find the real truth of shit. You just can't, you just like, you hate the truth on a different level, from a different spiritual level. You hate God, and that's creating such a unique level where you're choosing subconsciously and consciously just to ignore that shit. And to ignore that shit, now you're going on a certain place, and people hate God, you know. No shit. And I'm not claiming to be shit. I'm trying to understand what is the source of the universe and how people could fucking hate that, you know, and just have their own fucking twisted shit, you know. But the point of this video, real quick, not to get too long-winded, is what is the ego? What is the ego compromised of? And where is that compromising ego leading us towards before we understand anything else? Turns off video. JK. The ego is your higher self, and lower self has some type of growing intelligence from when it started to how it's moving to where it's going, forgetting that it could be going to God or it could be going away from God. It's choosing its own shit. It's some type of ego is choosing its own shit, you know? But what is the ego? The lower self ego has a shadow, and the lower self ego has a light intelligence. The higher self ego has a shadow, and the higher self ego has is subscribing to its light intelligence. And in between that is you, the ego. So it's like it's a star in between a circle. It's a different allegory of Synergy Alchemy 2. It's a star in between 4 window panes. You know, original open source, who cares, right? So, but this is a new insight right here. What is the ego? The ego is your higher self, has a light intelligence and a shadow. Your lower self has a light intelligence and a shadow. And people collectively, majority, they're subscribing to the lower self, not good, not bad. And more particularly, they're subscribing to the ignorance, detriment, shadow of that lower self. And that's the collective conscious state of the fucking planet itself. We're in the lower ego shadow. The lower ego isn't good, it's not bad, it's dual. It has a light, it's just lower's not good, it's not bad. It's just a different density. And the density also does have a shadow and a light intelligence. And people have a fucking ego that is just lower, or maybe their lower self somehow has an affiliation with the higher shadow. This is the essence of spirituality. Because it's showing you in the most swiftest simplicity how everything works. It's ego based. It's all ego based. It's ego based because look where your ego's at, you know? It's either letting you know what you need to fucking know, and I'm just like, I'm laughing at the irony, you know? I'm not laughing at any of your, you know, ignorant, confused, you know, demonic conformity type of shit. And obviously it's a demonic should be a context thing. So in this context, it's like just like ignorance, you know. Go to the last video. I'm not demonizing demons. And I don't expect you to get it, and I know how you feel and I know how you think, and you're giving a fuck is, it's GMO, you know. So may you find a more pure I don't give a fuck, so you could ironically feel good. But anyways, to keep moving along, is the essence of simplified spirituality is it's ego based. It's all affiliation. It's all relationships, creeds, you know, unknown, forgetting creeds, remembering creeds, amnesia turning into some type of remembrance, or the remembrance was always there, but it was just dormant. The remembrance was always there. It was in your unconscious and subconscious. The remembrance was always there. But the thing is, here we're talking about the ego. What is the ego? The ego is, based on the previous definition of what the ego is, where your growing ego is at, that's going to lead you to know what you could know and work with constructively or not. Or the ego is going to lead you to let you know what you don't know. You know, critical shit you fucking don't know, ya Jimmy. And that's just and 3D is just a fucking melting pot of extreme heaven and extreme hell, and the pursuit of that is and Jupiter's also like, you know, the is synonymous with pursuances and pursuits collectively. It's like, and he's just got kind of overseeing, like, you know, how like all of them, like how we all play together, you know, and how there is a winner and how there is a loser, and how that is simultaneously an illusion and not an illusion. Because we could all be winners if we choose God as the ultimate winner. So what we're pursuing as far as our ego, so our ego is going towards something, right? And based on where our ego is going towards, we don't necessarily know that, you know, we don't. So based on the previous definition of what the ego is on a standard level, we're working with that ego, right? And as we're working with that ego, we not good, not bad. Everyone's a subject, right? You know, not good, not bad. We're all subjects. We're all similar. We all it's a commonality, right? There's a commonality function of having the human template, or just being a being template, right? And that commonality, but like using it in the exalted way, because obviously the future is, you know, all of this shit is still going to be here, you know, but for us to distinctify the energies of, you know, pure divine order and the opposite of that and everything in between that, obviously, for us to work with that, aside from just like, you know, pretend we're about that, that's another critical difference, you know. So so the ego will let you know what it will let you know, right? And I'm gonna brush my teeth, you know, like 3 times. And I eat a lot of stuff, and I do a lot of like I do a lot of mouthwash, so I feel fresh. So I'm gonna say it right there. And but anyways, so the ego is gonna let you know what you could know, or the ego is gonna not let you know and be in the dark about something based on what you just don't know, you know. Like the ego, so that brings me back to one of my first points in bringing this video to the forefront or whatever. And that the point was the ego could be a blinder based on the previous definition. And it's not good, it's not bad. We all have the function of the growing ego, but the growing ego in between the ego of the higher self and the lower self is the trickster ego to the collective ego. Because there's a trickster ego and just a collective perspective and how that could distract you. And if we don't solve the trickster ego, that's the thing that's around the star in between the 4 window panes. It's the collective ego. And the collective ego has a trickster mechanism, and that trickster mechanism could feed the ego in between your higher self and lower self. It could lead you to wherever based on your will, your inner like balance, using Mars in balance to the bigger picture, not using Mars for the fragmented. You know, you have to be very careful with this path. You have to be careful with everything. You have to see what's supporting you, because if you don't, then you're just kind of like you're taking a poop where you eat. And I'm being serious. I'm not trying to be funny. That's like a real fucking that's a real fucking analogy, right? It's a real analogy. So obviously people could just jump the gun and assume like, oh, you're this, you're that, you're not funny. Like, I'm not trying to be. And we're all our own bees to the human, to the queen bee, right? Or to some queen bee. But obviously, like, you know, the fragmented hype is transcending that, right? No, we have to start from the bottom. We have to build from the ground up, based on what we came out of, based on like everything that we are, you know? So what is the ego? It's the lower self, not good, not bad. And obviously, like, I try to be as neutral as I can, but but even then, that rhetoric will be like whatever, because at the end of the day, you're just like, you know, when you go to sleep, it's a lessening of mental activity, and eventually how deep you could go for however wherever you go when you go to sleep. It's more of a being state, right? So within the being state, we could all relax into knowing that it's that we all have that commonality to just lean towards just being without the mental activity and without the ego, you know. But the ego will come back when wherever we go to sleep. And that's a whole different video. That's a whole different underground video. And I'm not trying to get long-winded, but where we go to sleep and how we come back and go back and forth, there's different details on that. But when we come back into the 3D, the ego is there operating how it's operating. And as the ego is there operating how it's operating, we're lessening the being state, and we're doing all the other senses. We're being with all the other senses of different types of being, and the 3D is animating more than just being. We're kind of being thinky, right? We're being mental. We're having a mental activity, and as we're having a mental activity, we're in a particular stage of our growth, not good, not bad. And I'm being very careful not to like be condescending, because I'm trying to find the likeness that I have to the bigger picture, right? All is self, right? You know what the predecessors are trying to teach us, all is self. Like, so this is like, but that's like, obviously that has its nuances too, you know, because obviously, like, if all is self, then is God really doing all of this shit? You know, is God evil kind of shit, you know? But that's why it's the nuance is it's allowing different things to experience individuation, and those individuations expressing their own individuation how they want to, and God being supremely neutral and letting everything be as it is, you know, a different type of non-dual and working with that is how you transcend everything respectively. So the ego is it's not good, it's not bad. It's let me just wrap it up real quick. So the ego, it's not good, it's not bad, but there's a 3D matrix mechanics dynamics that we're in, some type of simulation that we're in, that our dream body traveled through different layers of consciousness to participate and to accumulate and to invest into the soul's what do you call that? The soul's development and experience workings for it to participate in the tough challenges of 3D. And now with 3D, we're understanding how the ego works. So it's important to know how the ego works, so we could solve the solution, or so we could have the solution of some type of discomfort and some type of ignorance and some type of entrapment. So the ego here, it's like in between the higher self and the lower self, there's an ego that's kind of just like it's dynamic, right? It's moving, and that ego is it's affiliating itself with the collective ego, and the collective ego, on one half of it, it has a trickster mechanism, and that trickster mechanism could go into your ego, and now your ego could fucking develop accumulatively some type of trickster archetype. Not good, not bad. Shout out to the fucking predecessors. So they're not good, not bad. There's a trickster influence, right? And if you don't supremely balance that, then you could have some standard hypocrisies of how you view life, because how you judge another, little do you know, you could be doing that, you know? And I'm saying this in the highest respects into like, you know, the shared, you know, advanced metaphysicism or whatever. And I'm just saying, this, it just is what it is, my G. It just is what it is. These are like the mechanics of like source. It's somewhere along the line we could have signed up for it because we got attracted to like how we could develop a new experiment in creation. And the whole Kali Yuga, however long the time span was, it was immense. It's immense, you know. Let's just try to really have some collective healing. This, like, shit could get immense, okay? So since shit could get immense, maybe we don't have to be so judgy upon another person since we're living the same fucking challenge, you know what I'm saying? And since we're living the same fucking challenge, the judgments are unwarranted. If you judge, it's because you're insecure and your ego has some trickster affiliation, confused affiliation, and insecure affiliation. This is the dynamics of the ego. And within these dynamics of the ego, we could just recognize how there's a trickster mechanism in the ego, in the collective ego, and that trickster mechanism, if not balanced, but like the people who are like leaning towards more trickster, they're most ironically oblivious to the universal divine order, because the universal divine order, it has a bunch of shit that their ego doesn't know. So the ego is like a blinder. Look at everybody. Look at where they're at. They have an ego standardly, not good, not bad. And within that ego has an aura and an emanation. And if that aura and an emanation has a trickster mechanism in it, then ask them if they know everything. Because if they knew everything, then they wouldn't necessarily be doing what they were doing, because everything would be solved for them and they would be sharing that balance, because that's the ultimate mission, is ultimate like possibility for ultimate balance. But that's the thing, it's just a possibility, you know. You're choosing everything that you're doing, your original higher self is choosing, and your original higher self, it might be leaning towards not good, not bad, not necessarily evil, but it could be leaning towards just like some type of chaos, you know, no judgment. Or it could be leaning towards some type of order or some type of fucking balance, you know. So this is the essence of it. So within me saying all of this shit, where are you choosing your ego to go? Where are you choosing your ego to build? Like, how are you choosing your ego to create the reality that you're fucking living in? Because of the reality that you're fucking living in, you're paying attention for that reality to fucking keep going. You're paying with your attention. And now there's some type of, you know, energy friction there that makes a byproduct energy of some type of tension, however the tense, you know. Is it less tense? Is it more tense? Is it balanced tense? Is it comfortable tense? Something that needs to be inebriated and cohesivized, it needs tension, you know. A process and a production system rate of tension. So the ego, we are always going to have that ego forever. And the original ego is going to get lost in one of those areas of the ego. And we're going towards the future, right? So to sum it all up, I'm trying to say that somewhere along the line, our subconscious is choosing how our ego moves forward. Because how our ego moves forward, what I'm trying to say here, how our ego moves forward, we don't necessarily know what the ego is, because we're in a stage of growth. So as we move forward, our new ego could recognize the growth of our ego and what the ego actually is, so it doesn't have to go towards detriment, uncomfortability, and unfavorable situations. The essence of solutions and recognizing what the ego actually is. What is the spiritual ego and the essence of solutions, low key. And it's the essence of solutions because the ego is the thing that reveals the problem or the solution based on how the collective trickster mechanism has influenced your moving ego. And what is the ego? It's your new transitory dynamic self in between your lower self, and that lower self, the human self, has a light intelligence, good influence, and it has ignorance. And then the higher self's good influence and bad influence and its karmas. Have the best life ever.